let's go.
Okay, so we'll officially open up the meeting at 5:38 of the Ordinance Committee. And I'd like to start off the meeting by, first of all, apologizing to those of the public who had expected there to be public comment at today's meeting. And reviewing what we were looking to do, and reviewing the responsibilities, or what we as an ordinance committee are to do, is to really present the ordinances that we receive and prepare them for the Board of Selectmen to consider and evaluate. To that end, it didn't seem prudent or productive for us to really have public comment here, only to have those same folks have to repeat themselves and also give public comment at the time when this is presented, when and if this is presented to the Board of Selectmen, which is what we plan to discuss tonight. Additionally, we felt that even to the point where we felt it may be appropriate for us to have a Board of Selectmen meeting dedicated to this particular topic, based on some of the input and items that people have so far communicated to us. So to that end, we wanted tonight to discuss the potentials for the ordinance and the language that was suggested for the ordinance, and then vote as to whether or not we will be moving it forward to the Board of Selectmen. Now, as we mentioned in the past, and as previously indicated, it is still our understanding that this will not impact on the turf field decision that has been made. This is for us to establish an ordinance that would impact things going forward. And with that, officially start the meeting, and the first item is to review and vote for approval on the minutes from the last meeting of February 24th. Hopefully everyone got their package, were able to review the information, and I'll just ask if there's any comments, any edits, or anything that anyone sees that should be changed.
Mr. Chairman, I found them in order and have no edits. This is Beth Heller, so I'd be happy to make a motion to move them forward for approval.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments or any further comment or discussion?
No.
Nope.
With that, I'll vote for a vote.
Aye.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you. That's all three of us. So that motion is passed. Thank you. The second agenda item is for us to review the actual draft ordinances that were provided. And Jerry, I believe you had a hand in this. I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to offer in terms of the draft ordinance prior to us discussing it.
No, Mika, there's just two ordinances. One is the exact duplicate of what the town of Westport has passed, and the other one is a slightly edited ordinance, but it's up to the Ordinance Committee to refer either one or perhaps both, and let the Board of Selectmen make a decision at its meeting as to which one will go forward for a public hearing. So that's it.
And just to differentiate between the two, in terms of what I could see, the difference between the two, they're almost identical, except for the fact in one of the ordinances, it also bans or prohibits the use of organic material, such as cork, coconut husk, husk and silica sand, or acrylic coated sand, whereas the other one does not. The other one only specifies the synthetic type infill materials as opposed to the organic. So the organic being the only difference. I don't know if either of Joe or Beth, either of you saw anything else that might have been different.
No, I don't know if Jerry might suggest it would be worth it. I like the idea of perhaps submitting two of them, because perhaps we would hear from experts to further explain the addition, or why it's necessary to add more. I guess it's called Sample Ordinance Number 1, seems more inclusive and has more things, which I don't know enough about it. To make an opinion on that. I mean, they're both, one from Westport is, I guess, Ordinance Number 1, correct?
Let's see. I think the Westport one is.
Yeah, Westport is number 1.
Okay.
And,
Yes.
and number 2 is the one that was submitted by Donna Schuster.
Okay, the core, coconut husks, rice husks. So,
But again, it's perfectly permissible for you to submit both for the Board of Selectmen meeting in April, and then the Board of Selectmen could discuss it and present. We'll have to present one specific ordinance for the public hearing,
okay,
but you can decide which one.
okay.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on that? Comments?
Yeah, I have no problem sending two along because something like this, I think is just better in the first instance before the whole board anyway, something of this magnitude.
Right.
I noticed, yeah, that the number 2 basically would prohibit any type of synthetic turf field in town. Number 1 does not. The question I have on number 1, Jerry, that maybe we could look into between now and the board looking into this would be, again, ordinance number 1, B regulations. 2C, the use of artificial turf does not exceed the impervious coverage requirements. So I guess what they're saying is you could have a turf field using organic infill so long as the artificial turf does not exceed the impervious coverage requirements, which I guess are in our zoning regs, right? There would be a certain area coverage that you could have. I just think we should know whether a standard artificial turf field would exceed the impervious coverage requirements. I just don't want to have a trap there. That's all. I don't know the answer to the question.
We can look into that for the next meeting, and I'll talk to Chris Sullivan to see if she has any insight on that, Joe. Good point.
Well,
Yeah, I don't imagine it
was-
does, but again, I just don't want to. I don't want that to be something we overlook.
Okay.
I had a question, came to my attention this afternoon by someone who I think is pretty smart, said, the question is this ordinance prohibiting the use of artificial turf on Woodbridge Town property versus all towns and all properties? Because this would mean people couldn't have tennis courts, perhaps. People couldn't have, in the private property. So maybe we have to think about adding some language there, legal language. We have our anti-pesticide property, which ordinance, which is to all only town properties, right? So do we? I mean, just throwing that out there. Right? Someone suggested that.
Well, these particular ordinances here, if they were to hold, the language were to hold up, prohibit artificial turf and their infill. Or their infill. I don't know that it would preclude tennis courts and so forth unless they were artificial turf tennis courts.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of material you would use on tennis courts, putting greens, or things like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
That could include.
That just popped up this afternoon.
A putting green probably would fall under this.
Yeah.
Because there's no restriction as to size.
Right.
At least number 2 would seem to prohibit the use of any artificial turf.
Right.
And I don't think this is limited to town property. I think it's town-wide.
Yeah, and the question is,
written now, not to say that that's the way that, it needs to be considered, but I agree.
No,
that's what I'm asking.
As it's written now, right, as it's written now.
Right, that's what I'm asking for the lawyers in the group. Could we add that language?
Yes, we'll have to. The other thing is, Mika, I note that you mentioned in your beginning, the preamble there, that these ordinances, if they were to go forward and pass, would not preclude the approved turf field at Amity, but certainly there would have to be language added in to cover that, because these ordinances, as they stand now, do not necessarily lead to that conclusion. So I just throw that out there too. Again, if that's the intent of this committee and or the board, we would have to make that clear.
Understood, and I agree. It's,
Okay.
it would be best if it was made clear, one way or the other, depending on how the board wanted to move forward with that.
Right.
But I know that, Jerry, and I know we've mentioned it, and I understand this, that I understand that this is not necessarily clear at this point in time, but it is based on what you have looked at and advised in terms of this going forward as opposed to retroactive, so to speak. However, if you're prohibiting it and it hasn't been installed, we weren't sure whether, I'm not sure if that is indeed true. So I don't know if there's been anything more on that, Jerry, than we've already discussed.
No, there hasn't. You know, and the question is, as I think Beth said, and as Joe said, does the board intend to make this effective prospectively or retroactively? And a lot of people, lawyers included, can disagree on whether the ordinance as now written is retroactive or prospective. And to clear that up, the board can make some determination when it has its public hearing or at the meeting setting the public hearing. And it's up to the Board of Selectmen to make that decision.
Chair?
Yeah.
It's Joe, or anyone who knows the answer, maybe no one knows, I don't know, but my question, I guess, is when the Amity referendum was passed, what exactly was the question? I guess my question is, I saw somewhere where there was a claim that the referendum only approved to borrow money, but didn't approve the installation of the turf field, which I don't know how that could be, but I'm just questioning, just moving forward, since we're now being asked to, to consider and potentially pass an ordinance that might interfere with that referendum. I'm interested in what exactly did that referendum approve?
That's a good question. I think it had a dollar amount approved for, and I don't know if it mentioned turf, but it had a specific purpose for the dollar amount. I think it did say something about an artificial surface, but I'm not positive we can get the exact language.
Yeah, I remember something that said an all-weather field, right, Mika?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
it didn't mention specifically turf or anything along the lines of what it just said. There were actually two different questions. One of them was for more the infrastructure, if you will, and one of them was for the athletic field improvements, which included the soccer field and obviously this turf field for the football. It didn't specify turf field. It did specify athletic field and improvements, and there was a dollar amount associated with that which was approved by two of the three towns. And overall vote was, I believe, about 900 to 700 in approval to it.
Okay. Is it possible someone can dig up those questions, right?
Yeah, we can get the exact question for sure.
Yeah.
I have piles of stuff. I'm trying to find it right now, but I can't. I'm sorry. I've got it someplace.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I won't
No,
waste your
as
time.
long as we have that.
I did look it up, and I'm sorry I didn't make a copy. I thought it was pertinent as well, so I did look it up, and I'll see if I can find it while we're talking.
Okay. We'll talk
Well, that'd be
amongst
great.
ourselves here.
Yeah, so long as we have it for the board
Yep.
meeting. But I can't imagine the referendum was just to borrow money without saying what the money was for fairly specifically. But
I do remember an all-weather field. I do remember that.
okay,
But
all right, good.
Mika's looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that it mentioned turf.
It didn't. I know the referendum itself did not mention turf. It mentioned athletic field, but it did specify that this amount was for improvements to the athletic facilities, including the athletic field.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something like improvements to the turf, I mean, to the fields and facilities or something, athletic facilities, I can't remember. But I don't remember turf necessarily. I think it was, well, I say it 100 times, same thing. I don't remember though. We'll find it.
Yeah, and
That's
unfortunately, I don't have it here, so.
All right, well, when you guys find it.
I think I might have it here. Wait a second. There were FAQs. How much will the budget go up if the referendum passes? How much will it actually pay in taxes? Aren't all weather turf fields unhealthy? Health concerns. So the questions and the facts that went along with the referendum does say something about all weather fields, but I'm looking for the exact language and I don't have it.
Okay. All right, well, you guys will get it. As long as we have it for the next round at the board, I think that's fine.
Yeah, well, I know, as I said, Joe, I looked at it just like 2 days ago, so I will make sure that I get a copy to Jerry, and it's actually, the way that it was looked at and pulling it up, it was very specifically, here are the questions. Here's this dollar amount for this, and here's this dollar amount for this. Yes and no, yes and no.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so there's two things, a couple of things just to make sure we're, and for sake of Jerry's taking notes here. Obviously, one of the things we want to determine is whether or not we could certainly leave these discussions to the board, to the time when we're part of the Board of Selectmen, is town property or town-wide. And Jerry, I think it was what's ex post facto is what you said. Is that the right term? In terms of retroactive or prospective, huh?
Correct.
That was the whether or not the implemented ordinance would be for going forward or could impact on decision having already been made.
Right.
Right. That's all we need to determine which way the board would want to go, and then we could fashion the language to cover it. But.
Right, and language can be added to make sure it's clear one way or the other.
Right.
So that folks understand completely. Okay. Anything else?
No, well, Jerry was going to look into the zoning regulation regarding impervious surface area, how much, what those regulations are.
And also, we got to make a determination. We got to present to the Board of Selectmen whether it's intended to be just town property, municipal property. Keep in mind, the Amity High School is owned by the region, not the town, or whether it's all property. So that's for discussion at the next meeting.
Is there any? How do you two feel as relates to an alternative to the language here completely, as far as prohibiting these materials, in terms of putting a moratorium? And Jerry, I don't know if this is even feasible, but it was an option that was mentioned. I know as folks were discussing this once the vote did come out, in terms of moratorium on this until such time. I know the state is in the process of doing some work in regards to evaluation on this. Until such time as something a little bit more concrete comes out from that perspective.
Right, that's something that the board can consider for sure. And I just have the language now. Somebody emailed me the language, and the language on the question at the referendum was: shall Regional School District Number 5 appropriate $3,538,000 and authorize the issue of bonds and temporary notes in the same amount for various athletic facility improvement at Amity High School. Now that's the question that was presented to the voters, but then there were these questions and answers. And there was explanatory text, I think, that talks about artificial turf. But we'll get the exact language. The actual question didn't say anything about the kind of surface that is going to be used.
Okay.
Is that a particular concern for a particular reason? If I could ask.
Well, to me it is, and my thought process was, it was always my impression that what was approved was the allocation to borrow the money to install a turf field at Amity. That's been kicking around for years and years, and that was finally approved by that referendum. That was always my thought as to what was happening, in which case, if Woodbridge then went ahead and said, hey, that's all well and good, but now there's an ordinance that says you can't install turf fields in Woodbridge, that ordinance would then basically substitute itself for the will of the voters who voted in that referendum. And I'm not so sure that that's appropriate. So that's why I was interested to know exactly what was approved.
So Mika, I do have the question that I just read was on the ballot, and FAQs that people had the opportunity to review before they voted, and the only thing that related to the stadium was, and it says, an all-weather field will be installed in the stadium. And that was a question, that was a part of the FAQs. And the question was, as I read it, it didn't specify what it was going to be used for. It just said for various athletic facility improvements at Amity Regional High School.
Additionally, keep in mind, I know that folks have mentioned to me the fact that the school and the athletic department did go to all of the Board of Selectmen meetings, all of the Board of Finance meetings, and had other public sessions where actually what they did present was very specifically because at least if they presented what they presented to us at the time they presented to us, they were very clear and obviously indicating that it was a turf field. And they were line of questioning was around that at that time, and that is what I understand. They also presented to the town planning and zoning. So, but I certainly understand the concern.
Right. I don't know that it was a concern because, as I say, it was always in my mind that what was being approved or disapproved was the installation of a turf field. I'm not sure exactly why the question was framed that way, but I'm pretty sure the people who voted knew that they were voting up or down for a turf field. So anyway.
Understood and agree. All right. So how do we feel in terms of do we just want to put these two forth? Do we want to open it up for consideration for a moratorium? What do we want to move forward with as far as presenting to the Board of Selectmen, to the rest of the Board of Selectmen?
Well, for tonight's purposes, Mika, I think you have the two proposals before you, and the board and the Ordinance Committee should move to either send it off to the Board of Selectmen to decide on a public hearing, or not send it to the Board of Selectmen. And the issue of moratorium can be brought up at the Board of Selectmen meeting next time. That's not necessarily an ordinance. That isn't an ordinance. That's a whole different thing. But I think the thing that the Ordinance Committee should be working on is whether to forward these two proposals to the Board of Selectmen.
So it's Joe again. I don't have any problem doing that. I think actually that's in order, a good idea, with the proviso that I wouldn't go so far as to say we are recommending either one of those. That we're just really moving it up for like a in my mind, a de novo consideration of those proposed ordinances or any other similar type ordinance or no ordinance at all. I mean, again, I think we're just moving it, in my mind anyway, to the Board of Selectmen in total, rather than deal with something of this magnitude in the Ordinance Committee. That's my feeling. So I don't want them to think that, hey, we're saying, hey, here are these two proposed, we need to pick one type thing.
Right. I agree. Beth,
Okay.
are you on mute or no? You are on mute, Beth.
I'm talking away here, you know. Sorry about that. I'm commenting. I apologize. Would you like a motion to that effect?
Yeah, if you, I just wanted to make sure
I agree.
you're.
I am. I
Okay.
think it's important that we send this both, I'll make a motion that we send, which the two, what are they called here? Sample ordinances, number 1 and number 2, that was presented to the Ordinance Committee to the Board of Selectmen for consideration as to whether or not they choose to have an ordinance or not move out of the Board of Selectmen. Is that enough?
Yes.
I think that moves it forward. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Neil,
second.
should we add anything that indicates additional discussion related to town property or townwide, things of that nature? Or is that just something we take up at
Yeah,
time?
maybe in getting all the rest of the data that came up at ordinance necessary for the meeting. Do we need that in the motion, Jerry, or just it?
No, we'll get that. We'll get that together for April.
We just shouldn't forget all that stuff. That's all.
Right.
Okay. Including
So we have-
townwide. Okay.
We have Mrs. Shaw, don't worry.
All right.
Secret weapon.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Motion is
second
second, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any additional discussion, or are we comfortable with where we are?
I'm good.
I'm good.
No further discussion. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
That's 3 ayes. Any nays or abstentions? Be clear. Unanimous. Thank you very much. That is the last item on the agenda.
My favorite part, I motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion. Thank you, and Joe, sorry for the difficulty in the beginning, and thank you very much, folks.
Not at all. That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
Take care.
See y'all.
Bye. Off to my next meeting.